Our planet Earth experiences an ever-changing climatic cycle, which includes rising temperatures, changes in rainfall patterns, and an increase in direct heat from the sun. This has been adversely affecting our agricultural sector, which has cost us an estimated $14.4 billion in damages and losses due to major climatic events between 1994 and 2010. As a result of climate change, we have seen the development of extreme weather events such as hurricanes, floods, landslides, water stagnation, and saltwater intrusion. These have severely impacted our agricultural systems, which includes our farmlands, livestock, and by extension, our livelihood and value chains. One affected farmer shared her experience of the struggles she faced on a day-to-day basis on her small-scale farm. Miss Simpson, who has been a part of the Bull Savannah Benevolent Society in St. Elizabeth for over 4 years, says extreme temperatures has severely affected farming.
From time to time, as you know, from time to time, the heat is too much for certain plants. So we would leave the plant like this morning, and by the time we get back in the afternoon, most of the plants have died.
While admitting that the community does not practice rain harvesting, she notes that the government through RADA has been providing technical support. However, she adds that the farmers try to help themselves in mitigating the impacts of climate change, particularly during periods of drought, by employing methods such as drip irrigation.
That's what most of us do. So we would normally have to purchase our water, which is very costly, and we would actually use that for our farming. We are affected mostly by drought within the December period, comes straight down to May mostly. Sometimes it even runs straight down to August. But even say within climate change, our real problem still is the water. That is really our main problem. Lack of knowledge is really one of our barriers where climate change is concerned. We would love to increase knowledge in our farmers where climate change is concerned. We would actually, if we have stakeholders who we actually can invite to our meetings, or we set up a meeting date with them where they can actually teach our farmers or inform our farmers on whatever steps to take whenever we come up on climate changes, or how to get through where climate changes is concerned with our farming.
Ms. Simpson explains that flooding affects their crops.
Whenever we have flooding, it's a possibility because some farms, the floodwater will rush through it. Whenever we have hurricane, I think it comes with some acidic rain, so you know that everything actually burn off from the field. So we would lost everything during that time. So to be honest, during that time, we have to be careful. If we planning on planting anything, we would plant and try to reap before that time. But again, we still have to try and have things during that time as well, because if there's nothing for 2 months, then Jamaica is going to stand still.
Since 1995, there has been an increase in tropical cyclones. In recent times, we have seen several hurricanes reaching as high as Category 5, the highest number on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale. According to a 2020 study published by the Climate Studies Group at the University of the West Indies, Mona, it has been projected that the Earth will see a rise in temperatures from 0.47 degrees Celsius to 1.17 degrees Celsius by 2030. In later years, the temperatures will further heighten from 0.6 degrees Celsius to 2.3 degrees Celsius by 2060. Acting CEO of RADA, Marina Young, says two critical impacts of climate change in Jamaica includes used water availability and increased extreme natural disasters such as hurricanes, landslides, water stagnation, seawater intrusion, and floods.
In all cases, the impact significantly affects directly not only agriculture, but also a rural livelihood and value chain. According to the World Risk Report, Jamaica is ranked number 29 out of 181 countries as being most at risk. And Jamaica also considered to be at the very high risk classification.
The Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries has developed a National Agriculture Disaster Management Plan as well as a climate change framework strategy as part of its efforts to build resilience and capacity.
We also are very heavily focusing on the on-farm water management and especially in the areas of increasing efficiencies. It is a fact that majority of agriculture sector in Jamaica is rain-dependent, and therefore it makes us very vulnerable to the events such as droughts and dry spells. So therefore, RADA extension staff widely promote use of technologies like drip irrigation systems to ensure that our farmers can successfully cope with crop production on continuous basis during the dry periods and during the very frequent droughts, which we're actually experiencing almost once or twice per year.
Ms. Young adds that the extension services of RADA has assisted in training farmers on drip irrigation.
As a strategy to cope with the drought and dry spells, we are in Jamaica for a number of years scaling up installations of rainwater harvesting systems, which we successfully validated in collaboration with the FAO. And those systems consist of the small shed with a zinc roof, which is used to basically harvest the water. The water would be channeled in 1,000-gallon storage tank, and then from the tank, through the gravity drip irrigation system, water would be channeled to the field to irrigate the crops.
Ms. Young says through the special project intervention, RADA promotes water storage capacities as farmers are frequently affected by droughts and dry spells.
And for example, during the 2021-2022 periods, we implemented a project where 2,000 farmers benefited from the installation of the 1,000 water storage tanks, plastic tanks, and they also benefited from quarter-acre drip irrigation system, which would help them to cope with the challenges of the drought. The tanks are used for dual purposes. It could be used for rainwater harvesting, but in many cases, the farmers purchasing the water, and therefore they have additional water storage capacity.
Given the geographical terrain of Jamaica, the island is very susceptible to watershed degradation.
As approximately 80% of the land surface is hilly and mountainous, with more than 50% having slopes greater than 20 degrees. So we have really hillside agriculture in Jamaica. So therefore, conditions like that make us very vulnerable to rapid loss of the soil, and also requires sustainable application of sustainable soil management and conservation treatments. So in the Rural Agriculture Development Authority, we provide land husbandry services through the specialized officers and also agriculture extension officers, where through the training and practical demonstrations, we assist farmers in construction of the land husbandry treatments on their farm to, first of all, to ensure that the valuable soils are retained, and also the moisture which is comes through the mostly rainfall conserved as much as possible.
As part of its efforts to build farmers' resilience, Ms. Young explains a production initiative program which promotes the use of an early warning system for specific pests such as the beet armyworm.
And that system includes actually regular monitoring of the fields, collection of the data, then use of meteorological data, and in combination, when analysis completed, it's provide us with a short-term forecast, or which is showing basically trajectory of the pest. Because the system has its predictivity component, which is allowing us to implement mitigation strategy or prevention strategy where we want to either minimize, either totally prevent occurrence of outbreak of beet armyworm. We widely promoting establishment of fodder banks, which are usually allow farmers to have accessible source of the grasses or whatever feed they use during the dry spells. And we're also highly promoting the preparation of the silage and mineral blocks, which also help farmers to come through the times which are challenging in terms of the dry season.
Over the years, there have been several attempts to establish an agriculture insurance program to aid farmers in their recovery efforts from the impacts of climate change. But Ms. Young laments the process has been difficult.
One of the local companies are currently offering the product, which is called micro insurance or Weather Protect, which we consider to be parametric insurance. It is triggered based on insurance policy, which is designed to help and cope with the extreme weather events, specifically wind and rain. And payout is based on a weather index, which the insurance company use. For example, excess rainfall and high wind speed measured in each parish. And once a trigger value is reached, the payroll will be triggered automatic payments. So it is a recent introduction, and it is used by a number of the farmers, and we hope that this product will be more and more accessed by our farmers.
Loans are also available for farmers at various financial institutions.
Through the network of small microcredit entities in Jamaica, some of the companies offering special loans which are low interest, and I'm aware that some of their products are including even climate smart loans where the farmers can borrow at the single digit interest rate, and those loans would be used for improving of the on-farm infrastructure to make it less prone to the natural disasters.
Brian Francis, a farmer, says he uses hydroponic system for yielding his crops.
Faster yield, they get about 400% more yield. The yield meaning the shorter time. Because you get a more ideal climate for a more extended period of time, so it grows faster.
Because of the threats from climatic weather conditions, Mr. Francis has implemented practical measures as preparation for any unforeseen eventualities.
We can't really get protected from everything, but I mean there's a limit at which we can protect ourselves. So like we can withstand a Category 3 hurricane. In case there's a flooding, the plants are off the ground and so forth. Technology-wise, we can shut down the system from anywhere. We have standby power. We have reserve water. We have everything. Yeah, and somebody's on the farm that is always, keeping up to date and so forth. So if water running out, we know we must have a plan.
He has also customized the farming environment to help reduce extreme heat on the crops.
We basically chill our water to about 21 degrees, and that is more than ideal for the plants. Plants love it, so no matter how outside hot, the plant roots are good and they're breathing freely. The humidity, we still can pass that. If we want to increase or decrease, we have something called a cooling fin. So we release some water inside of it and the fan will pull it through. So basically creating all of that conditions for every stage. Every stage of the plant, it need a different condition. So, we run a little experiment. We're not no farmer, we just have to learn. So if we do a little test and realize that this temperature we get a certain yield, record it and then try, do a next, just change something, not too much, and see what kind of growth, if it's a plus or minus, and then as long as I have a benchmark to work with.
As shared by Mrs. Young, the way forward is to implement best practices to safeguard and improve our agricultural productivity in the midst of global temperature changes. Shelley outlines some of the best practices that she applies to protect her livestock from the impacts of climate change.
These houses are tunnel ventilated houses. They're basically first world technology. They're climate resilient infrastructure. So they are built to withstand a Category 3 hurricane as it relates to water storage. That's a very important aspect of the farm because we have to ensure that the flock has water, adequate water throughout the growth period. So we have a 50,000 gallon storage tank for the farm, which is able to which we're able to use for a 2-week period, just in case we have a hurricane or any kind of natural disaster. We rely heavily on electricity, so just in case we have power outage because of a hurricane or any other natural disaster, we also have a generator for backup electricity. So I would encourage farmers to ensure that they have adequate water and adequate storage as it relates to their crop and what is important to their crops.
Although she does not practice rainwater harvesting, Shelley has put much investment in water storage.
We have a well on our farm, and where my farm is located, I'm basically blessed because we also have national irrigation, and we also have a well on the farm. So basically, we invest in water storage just in case the supply is out because of any disaster.
The poultry farmer believes that the lack of accessible credit has affected the adaptations by farmers.
Because in order to protect the farms, you have to invest in these infrastructures that we have invested in on our farms, such as the water storage. It is very expensive to build a water storage or a 50,000 gallon water storage for our farm. Because I'm in poultry, I can only speak to poultry farmers. So we rely heavily on electricity. It's also expensive for us to build out the infrastructure to protect the farm against natural disasters, like for example the water storage and also the generator, and to invest in these kinds of technology, because as I said before, the houses are built to withstand a Category 3 hurricane.
And the lack of knowledge also poses a challenge to farmers.
Because some farmers are not aware of what is happening as it relates to climate change and so on. They're just not aware of how it affects their crop, I think, basically.
Instructor at the Nakalva Polytechnic College in Hanover, Randa Taylor, says reducing emissions is important for climate-smart farming.
These include practice rotational grazing to sequester carbon in the soil. So while we have the animals in the pastures, we do not want them to totally graze every day. So we will partition the pastures and we will have animals be in, for example, pasture 1 today. And by the end of the month, we will remove those animals to another pasture that would have enough food for them, enough forage. And so we will continue that process. In doing so, the carbon that is in the soil will significantly reduce, and therefore this will reduce any form of emission. We also can manage manure to reduce methane and nitrous oxide gases. By doing this, we can cover the manure storage facilities. So the area that we would have dumped the chicken litter, the goat feces, the cow feces, and so on, we can cover these areas so that the excessive emitters or the excessive gases are not released into the atmosphere.
There are several sustainable practices that farmers can use to help mitigate or reverse the effects of climate change.
Some of these practices include zero tillage, where they will not be using any form of technology to prepare land for farming. They can also use crop rotation, where they will plant crops at different times on the same piece of land. They could also do contour farming, where they will organize their crops, though the crops may be planted on steep slopes, so that too will help to reduce or mitigate the effects of climate change. Of course, they can also use plastic mulching, where they will cover the soil, and in covering the soil, that will prevent excessive carbon dioxide and other gases to be released into the environment. And of course, they could use protective structures, for example, the shade house or greenhouse technology. And these are among many others that farmers can use to mitigate or to reduce the effects of climate change.
However, there are not much approaches farmers can take to protect their livestock from natural disasters.
It is quite prudent that the farmer or farmers take the animals or their livestock to a secure area on the farm, especially when these animals are heavily laden with young ones, so the mothers may be pregnant, right? So it is important that the farmer will take these animals to higher grounds, elevated areas, so that they will not be soaked in the rain. And of course, we know what will happen there. So if these animals are soaked in the rain, they can, of course, die. And what's going to happen? The farmer is going to lose tremendously.
Ms. Taylor outlines some agricultural practices that could help to reduce crop loss.
One, we could do cover cropping, such as the cultivation of cucumbers, pumpkins, watermelons, any vine crops, sweet potatoes. So what happens here is that these leaves, they will break the velocity of the rainfall. And so when the soil is covered, the impact of the raindrops will be significantly reduced. Also, the crops will reduce the buildup of carbon dioxide in the soil. And we know that carbon dioxide is an important gas in the production or the manufacturing of photosynthesis. Another practice that can be used to reduce crop loss is rainwater harvesting. So farmers can set up their containers along with their gutters to harvest the rainwater. And this, of course, they can use for their domestic purposes. They can use it to feed their livestock. And for sure, they can use it to irrigate their crops. They can practice intercropping, where they plant more than one crops on the same piece of land. So they can be harvesting, for example, corn this month. Another 2 months down the road, they could be harvesting sweet potato and so on. So this too can help to reduce crop loss due to climate change.
In addition, she says organic farming can be used to improve the health of the soil.
Integrated crop and livestock forestry system. Yes, farmers can integrate their crops and livestock, and also they could be planting their forest trees. So they could have their timber trees, their cedar, their teak, their maho. They could be planting as well other crops, and of course they have their livestock. So when they will harvest the crops, the refuse from the crops can be used, all right, to feed the livestock. They can also use for mulching. They can use to add back, valuable nutrients to the soil. Another adaptive measure is to utilize rainwater. And of course, the farmers can implement catchment systems such as their plastic tanks. So the Rhino, well, that's a brand, but those big, thick plastic tanks, they could utilize those to capture the rainwater. And they could set up their guttering, right, so as to maximize on the catch from the rains. Another adaptive measure is to increase soil health by using more organic fertilizers. For example, compost and animal wastes. All right, so when we fill our soils with healthy fertilizer, I'm not saying that the inorganic fertilizers are not beneficial, but I'm saying that the organic fertilizers are more beneficial to the soil in that it will provide that buffer. It will give that support system to plants, to plant roots. All right, the healthier the soil, the better your crops, the better yields you will get from your crops.
Ms. Taylor says farmers ought to practice climate smart agriculture in order to boost food security.